Hello. You have a collect call from
John Cena!
Will you accept the charges?
Oh, your mother.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Cancelled Games. I've been doing this series for 4 years now, would you believe it? And as we're running out of systems to look at, I thought I'd do at least a few episodes covering particular genres. Today we're looking at 8 cancelled wrestling games. Wrestling games have been around for almost as long as consoles have, from the 1980s golden age of wrestling, my personal favourite, featuring the likes of Hulk Hogan and the legendary Ultimate Warrior, to the highly entertaining Attitude Era of the late 90s, right through to the modern day. WWE was in my day called the WWF, or World Wrestling Federation. In 2002 they changed the name to WWE after a lawsuit issued by the other WWF, the World Wildlife Fund. No, that's not a joke. Point is, you'll see some games in the list titled WWE and some WWF, but they are the same company. Such a broad history of wrestling games of course resulted in several that were cancelled, so let's have a look at 8 that never made it. First up is WWE Titans Parts Unknown, which was heading to Xbox and PS2, being developed in 2004 by Next Level Games, perhaps most well known for developing Super Mario Strikers on the GameCube and most recently Luigi's Mansion 3 on Switch. This is a bit of an oddity in that it was to be a versus fighter rather than a traditional wrestling game. The WWE characters featured in the game would be oversized caricatures of themselves, and the whole game would have a very stylised, cartoony visual style. Unfortunately, due to its very short development time, only concept art seems to exist. It does however give us some good indicators of what these playable characters would have looked like. As we can see here with this concept art of Kurt Angle, they would literally be larger than life, with overstated dimensions and enormous muscles. And again here with Mysterio. The stages for the brawls would also be quite the departure from the norm. Concept art shows that the stages would be set in a variety of different locations rather than wrestling rings. For example, this castle, which shows a destructible arena with walls that are demolished during matches to reveal background scenery. From the little info we have on WWE Titans, we know that these destructible environments would play a large part in the level design, and that locales would vary wildly from castles to urban environments. It was also to feature an involved single player story mode. But WWE Titans would be even more out there than this. The designers also toyed with the idea of adding their own fighters to the roster of real world wrestlers, including magical characters that could transmogrify into wild animals. Very bizarre indeed. Seemingly WWE Titans was only ever at the conceptual stages, and these designs were created by Next Level Games to pitch the idea. The idea was vetoed by THQ, who owned the rights to produce WWE games from 1999 up until their assets were sold off in 2013 when Take-Two acquired the rights. I won't dwell on this one for long as we know almost nothing, but AKI was developing another Nintendo 64 wrestling game for THQ called WWF Backlash. AKI developed what are arguably some of the greatest wrestling games of that era, including the N64 WCW vs NWO games and WWF No Mercy, the latter of which you're seeing on screen. When Backlash was scrapped, it was reportedly between 20 and 30% complete. The reason behind its cancellation seems to be that enthusiasm for developing Nintendo 64 games was dwindling in favour of Nintendo's new GameCube. A shame, as a follow-up to No Mercy could have been a nice last hurrah for the N64's superb track record for quality wrestling games. And that leads us straight into AKI's new venture, WCW Mayhem 2. Having severed ties with THQ, who as I said owned the WWF rights, AKI began development on a sequel to WCW Mayhem for Electronic Arts. WCW Mayhem 2 seems to have gone by several names, including WCW 2000 and simply WCW Wrestling. Whatever you call it, it was being developed for the PS2 with a planned 2001 release date. The original WCW Mayhem seen here on screen developed by Kodiak for EA, was released on the PlayStation and N64 in 1999. Mayhem 2 would feature the WCW's big stars of the time, including Ric Flair, Booker T and Sting, and boasted over 1,000 moves as well as a branching storyline. It even appeared on the cover of PSM PlayStation magazine in May 2000, referenced as WCW 2000.
Actual PS2 graphics, mate.
The issue also featured a 2-page article which gives some interesting information on the game. It seems that there would have been no wrestling rings, with the action instead happening outside. Concept art shown here includes plans for a car wrecking yard and a boiler room. A segment titled Tomorrow's Technology Today also shows that it would have used what they refer to as cyber scanning, technology which maps the faces of the WCW wrestlers to their in-game counterparts, and this would have been the first wrestling game to use such facial scanning techniques. In fact, the only available footage of Mayhem 2 is a video of these early stage facial animations. The article is very enthusiastic and optimistic about the whole thing, even going as far as saying they think it will be one of those rare titles that makes a huge impact on its genre. WCW Mayhem 2 was cancelled in March of 2001 when the WWF acquired WCW. But AKI didn't waste any of their work. They repurposed the game's engine and some of its assets into Def Jam Vendetta, which came to PS2 and GameCube in 2003. This was very much a wrestling game, but rather than feature popular figures from the wrestling world of WWF or WCW, it starred several of Def Jam's rappers. Another wrestling themed game that wasn't exactly a wrestling game was WWE Brawl, being developed by Blue Tongue Entertainment between 2009 and 2011 for the PS3 and 360. I've seen this described as a beat 'em up, part of THQ's initiative to broaden the horizons of games based on the WWE franchise, but from the available trailer it seems more like an arena fighter to me, more akin to Power Stone or Smash Brothers. It would feature 4-player brawls set in various different locations instead of in a ring, much like WWE Titans. It has more in common with Titans too. The concept art for the playable characters depicts them in a similar cartoony and exaggerated style, but goes one further by giving them fictional personas, complete with invented lives and backstories. For example, Triple H is depicted as the King of Kings, who wields a mystical hammer, and The Undertaker can summon the souls of the damned to aid him in battle. Stone Cold and John Cena are depicted wearing various pieces of body armour. John Cena's fictional persona saw him working as a mechanic in the game City. It looks like quite a few of the characters would have some form of magical or supernatural attack. From the available gameplay footage we can see that the playable characters stick to the exaggerated proportions and style of the concept drawings, although don't look quite as cartoony, being 3D. This arena is set on a city street between a bank and a chicken shop. This seems scarily plausible because, as any Englishman knows, the chances of you seeing a fight outside a chicken shop on a Friday night are extremely high. WWE Brawl's slogan was "No ring, no ref, no rules." The finished game would feature many of these outdoor arenas sprawled across what the developers called Brawl City, all featuring destructible environments and myriad everyday objects that could be used as weapons. Many would be themed around a particular wrestler, for example a graveyard for The Undertaker. We can also see from the button layout that there would be several superpowers per character, performed by pressing any one of the 4 face buttons in tandem with one of the shoulder buttons. Blue Tongue's character concept art went down a storm, prompting talk of expanding the WWE Brawl franchise to other media, including an animated series, action figures and clothing. The art style would certainly lend itself to an animated series. In the end, despite overwhelming enthusiasm in the project, and after it was publicly announced in 2011, it was cancelled almost 3 years into its development. It's believed that WWE Brawl was at the time only 6 months to a year away from being completed. Beyond mere speculation, the reasons behind its cancellation are unknown. It does seem odd considering there is talk of such a wide-ranging WWE Brawl franchise. By far the earliest cancellation on the list is UWC, in development for the NES in the late 80s by Thinking Rabbit. UWC stands for Universal Wrestling Corporation, but the game seems to be based on WCW and features several WCW wrestlers. The name UWC was apparently used for a brief period prior to using the initialism WCW, so perhaps this was a planned licensed game. UWC uses the same engine as WCW World Championship Wrestling on the NES, which was a 1990 re-release of 1989's Superstar Wrestling on the Famicom. Seen side by side, the similarities are clear. Maybe the two games are linked beyond using the same engine, I don't know. Obviously it looks primitive being an NES game, but it actually looks quite decent for the time, with some good animations, a wide variety of moves and very clean graphics. Interestingly, UWC was completely obscure until 2019, when a YouTuber called Stephen Reese obtained a prototype from a former Nintendo employee. Thanks to the excellent Video Game History Foundation in California, and check them out by the way as they do amazing work, the game was made available and this footage was made public. And so was the ROM. It's freely available online if you want to play UWC on your EverDrive or on an emulator. Not only do we have the Video Game History Foundation for that, but Stephen, who reportedly turned down an offer of $10,000 to sell the game under the agreement it wouldn't be released. All credit to Stephen, he would rather see the ROM released for all to enjoy. Good man. We've already mentioned WWF No Mercy, developed by AKI for the N64, but a port was planned for the Game Boy Color. The plan was that the handheld version would act as a companion title to the N64 game, with the two games interacting via the N64's transfer pack. The idea was that a player can insert their Game Boy Color cart into the transfer pack, and then use points earned on the handheld version to spend on additional content in the N64 game. This transfer pack support was at some point dropped from the N64 game, so of course the Game Boy Color's port was abandoned. A sequel to 2008's TNA Impact, which came to the PS2, PS3, 360 and Wii, was planned by Midway Games. It was being developed by Midway's LA studio for release in 2010. Not much to say here as we know absolutely nothing, apart from they announced it was in the works. In mid-2009 Warner Bros bought Midway, but the buyout did not include the TNA license, so obviously any plans for a sequel were scrapped. Later that year, South Peak Games acquired the TNA license and subsequently released TNA Impact Cross the Line for the DS and PSP, which was more of a handheld revamp of the original TNA Impact rather than a true sequel. Super Mario Spikers was to be a sort of spin-off of the Super Mario Strikers series of football games, or soccer if you're in North America, which was known as Mario Smash Football in PAL territories. Developed by Next Level Games, who we saw earlier having been the developer for WWE Titans, and published by Nintendo, it started on the GameCube before getting a sequel on the Wii called Mario Strikers Charged. Super Mario Spikers started life as a volleyball game initially known by the working title Mario Volleyball. Development began in 2006 after the completion of Mario Strikers Charged on the Wii. This initial concept would have seen the gameplay fall more in line with the other Mario themed sports games like Mario Tennis. After a while, Next Level decided to strangely turn it into a mixture of volleyball and wrestling. The project became more like their Mario Strikers games and the name was changed to Super Mario Spikers. All public knowledge of the game was absent until 2014 when Unseen64 unearthed these images of concept art and some test animations of some of the wrestling moves. These and some concept designs for the arenas are all that's available. The concepts for Mario's uniform vary. There's this white outfit sporting red flames and this style which is based on the US Olympic and college wrestling attire. We can see from the arena designs that in addition to the obvious wrestling and volleyball influences, the game, or at least some levels, would have had a game show theme. As mentioned, only the concept art exists, apart from a very short video clip of some early character animations. Rumour has it that a playable prototype was created, but when the Nintendo bosses saw it in action, they thought it was far too brutal and decided that it didn't sit well with Nintendo's principles, so the project was cancelled in 2007. So that was 8 cancelled wrestling games. Let me know if any of these tickled your fancy, and as always, Thanks for watching.
I'm sorry, no, there is not any chance in hell that we're ever going to have wrestling in this house again. But thank you, but no. Have a good day.
You can find the rest of the cancelled game series in this playlist.